Okay, fantastic. All right. Welcome everyone to our fourth webinar. Today's topic, I'm sure, has sparked everyone's curiosity. Criticism. Criticism is so commonly faced in our everyday lives, and sometimes we wish we would have given it back to our critics, or perhaps chosen to stay quiet. Well, I'm sure you will find today's session relatable and helpful. This is the first of its kind session for Teja because for the first time we have two amazing guest speakers. Before we begin our usual housekeeping, kindly keep your profile on mute and use the chat box for any comments so we can make it interactive. And if the meeting times out after 40 minutes, kindly join back into the same webinar using the same link. And now I'll hand you over to Kalyani.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the fourth webinar. We love your interest and participation, and today's topic, as Sachin mentioned, is so relevant. I'm sure you'll get great value out of today's session. So criticism is common. If you're doing something in life, anything really, you're sure to have been criticized at some point. Whether it's your job or parenting, cooking, housekeeping, driving, household chores, learning a new skill, um, you would have faced criticism. And if you're doing nothing, then congratulations, because you will be spared from criticism. But I don't think any of us fit the later category. So why do people criticize? Most commonly, we receive criticism if we've made a mistake. People may be jealous of you. They may have different opinions from you. Some genuinely want you to improve, perhaps like a parent or teacher, but not always. Some simply want to drag you down. And how do you and I typically react when we receive the criticism? We get defensive, angry, choose not to listen, walk off. Sometimes it may hurt us so much that we even go into a shell for a few days. Our response obviously is based on circumstance, our individual personality, and maybe who the criticism came from. Some of you have shared with us what we requested about a recent memory you have of some criticism you received. So thank you very much. We value your trust. And we will be sharing this anonymously, and you will see why it will actually benefit the whole group. Jayanti, I think you've received some examples. Do you want to read them out?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank everyone who shared their comments with me, because thank you for trusting in me and sharing about your criticism. That in itself is a challenging task for a lot of people to talk about a time of their lives when they were criticized. So thank you for sharing that. Unfortunately, I can't share all the examples of everything that people shared, but I'm going to pick on three of the examples which I thought were really relevant and could benefit other people as well. So we had one person's response who was talking about a time they were criticized for having body odor, which is a very unusual thing, but it still, I think, is a very relevant example, because this person said that they were running late for work, and that's why they were literally running, because they had to make it in time. So they had to run a few blocks, and then they got there and they were like sweating a lot. It was a hot summer day, and for those of us who are in Australia, we know what it's like, the heat in the summer. So when that person got to work, they were sweating, and they were like probably smelling of sweat, which is a completely natural bodily secreted fluid. But for some reason, they got this feedback that they were smelling of body odor. And to deal with this criticism, first of all, this person told me that they had feelings of, they felt ashamed about it. And they were really taken aback by this comment. But they decided to deal with it calmly by asking their colleague, hey, can I borrow your deodorant? They went to the bathroom, applied some deodorant, washed their face. But it definitely stayed with them as something to be ashamed of. So it's interesting how small things like that can really stick. The other example, which I thought was interesting, was that this person was in a lecture, and one of their professors or the teachers criticized them in front of their whole class, saying that they cannot be of said chosen profession. So they said, "You will never become an engineer." And that person was really taken aback. And the feelings associated were really interesting in this case, because this person said they felt guilty, and they also had a lot of self pity. So I think self pity is also a very addictive feeling that we can experience through criticism. Um, so this person interestingly said that that gave them the fuel, they powered through it, and then they got really good grades in the next semester. Uh, but while having said that, this person also interestingly said, uh, an added note after this experience, that whenever someone criticizes them, it really sticks. And whenever someone gives them good feedback, says best of luck, like whenever someone says something appreciative or wishes well, it's really hard for that person to soak it in, because the criticism has affected them so much, and they're wired to hear critical feedback, and they can't soak in the good feedback very easily because of this. So that's another example. A third example, which is very, very common, so I think most of us will be able to relate to this, um, is criticism at work. So anybody who's got a boss above them, I'm a PhD student, I have a supervisor. Some of you will know this feeling really well, of having a supervisor who constantly gives you feedback. And sometimes it can be a bit personal as well. For example, this person told me that they were criticized for being extra social at work, saying that, "Oh, I've always seen you talking to people at work. You're so easily distracted." So uh, the person who was at the receiving end of the feedback felt like it was a very convenient way of saying, "Hey, you're lazy. You're just like talking around to people and socializing, and you're not doing any work." And so it was really easy for them to take it personally. While and she really felt accused of being lazy, whereas the actual thing, the introspective aspect of it, was that she was not feeling supported by her supervisors and her superiors. So she was trying to seek help from her peers, and she was trying to get more motivation. But uh, this resulted in feel getting this feeling of being accused of being lazy. And so there's many ways in which we process criticism, and I find it very interesting. So thank you for sharing all of this, and especially about your feelings, because I think they are so relevant and important when we identify how we feel after we are being criticized.
Yes, thank you, Jayanti, for sharing those examples. So I think you would have found some of these relatable. And you agree, Jayanti, right, that when we receive the criticism, we often think, oh, I'm probably the only one who gets told this. And it has, on some levels, crept into your subconscious mind, and you have built some self doubt, or you have, uh, it has affected your self esteem. It has probably even, like, for example, the person who, for whom it fueled uh, their desire to achieve something, was the quite the contrary effect. It doesn't do that to all of us, and in fact most of us will be in that self doubt or lowered self esteem position. um, and that's quite common, so it's not
Yes.
just you.
Interestingly, that person also shared that despite that circumstantially they made fueled it and had the good grades or everything, but in the long run it seems like it has affected them quite a
Mm.
bit, in the sense that they can't take positive feedback.
Yeah, so that's another flip side to it, I guess. I think it's now the perfect point in time for me to introduce you to two amazing guest speakers. They are going to be talking to each other in a more casual conversational tone, but you will get pearls of wisdom from whatever they're speaking, and I'm sure they will be talking about examples that are much more easily relatable. So let me introduce you to our two guest speakers. Our first guest speaker is Dr. Naina Mendi. So a bit about Dr. Naina Mendi. She continues to be a student of psychology and is a lifelong learner. She is a PhD holder in industrial psychology from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She has 35 years of experience in human resource management and facilitation. She's a practitioner of various behavioral approaches like neuro-linguistic programming, rational emotive behavioral therapy, having conducted several workshops on personality development and interpersonal skills. And our second guest speaker today, Ms. Pratima Havaldar. She is a practicing psychologist and was an executive coach at a popular pharma company. She has a master's in psychology from Mumbai University, a postgraduate certificate in applied psychology from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and is a lifetime member of Bombay Psychological Association. She is a certified practitioner in a range of psychological therapies. She has decades of experience in consulting organizations in the area of people development and conducting behavioral training for various organizations. She also has an independent counseling practice in her own private clinic. She has to her credit some work she has done in setting up a psychological unit in Singapore during her tenure as a Deputy Director, Psychological Services, Ministry of Community Development in Singapore. So a very warm welcome to our two amazing guest speakers, and I am now going to hand over to them shortly. But just before that, a quick reminder, as the guest speakers are talking, if you do think of any questions, I actually encourage you to put it in the chat. I will be collecting these questions. So on behalf of all our participants today, I will be posing those questions to the guest speakers. So please feel free to type them in the chat box as you think of the questions. Welcome, ladies, and I hand over to you, Dr. Naina Mendi. You will have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Kalyani. Thank you, Kalyani, for having me and Pratima on this webinar. It's really very. I had heard your earlier webinars and participated as a receiver in that program. Uh, Pratima is my old associate, and it's very nice, Pratima, to have you in conversation at Teja webinar. You know, the title of this workshop and the sharing which Jayanti has from friends, it has triggered some questions in my mind. So mostly the emotions associated with criticism appear to be so-called negative. I'm saying so-called negative because I don't think emotions, any of the emotions is negative. It's only like when you make use of, put those emotions to use, they become functional or dysfunctional. So, you know, would our life be wonderful if we had to receive no criticism? But as Kalyani pointed out initially, that it's not possible for any active individual. Then will it be a good idea to avoid criticism as far as possible? But then, you know, one very interesting question I have is this film awards. They have a special category of critics award. Now, why do they invite people pointing fingers at them? So I'm really wondering that what what is the you know, benefit of having criticism? So Pratima, I think now we will have the conversation around some, because we have a limited time, on receiving criticism through 5 pertinent questions, I believe, 4 W's and 1 H. That is, who criticizes, where are we getting criticized, why are we getting criticized, what is that we receive in criticism, and how is the criticism done. So my first question to Pratima is, do you think it matters who is giving the criticism?
I think, madam, you need to unmute yourself. We have some technical difficulties here. I'm sure we'll get through this quickly.
I think we can just. She's not very tech savvy on Zoom, but um, ma'am, if you can click on the dots in your profile and just unmute and turn the video
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Looks like you've unmuted yourself. Good. Ah, it's mute again.
Pratima, press the unmute button.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what. Do you want to continue, Dr. Naina Mendi? Please just.
Okay.
We'll make sure she
We'll
joins
come
in.
back to her. Yeah, we'll come back to her question, like who is criticizing? Does it make a difference? Till such time, I will just uh, go ahead with like where we are getting criticized. Does the place or the occasion matter? Like where do I receive the criticism? And my experience says yes, it does hugely matter, because I think all of us have experienced that. Don't we feel more embarrassed if the criticism we receive happens in presence of others? Like, for example, if I receive some critical feedback in front of colleagues in my office, or if it's a family situation in presence of children, uh, or if suppose there are guests around or outsiders in the room, and then I receive the criticism, I think it does matter. I mean, the embarrassment is uh, much more in presence of others. So what I feel is that, also, if not only gives me some put me into defense, but it also might happen to people when it is inappropriate occasion or inappropriate place. I would take this as a personal attack on me in the first place, and then I also may have doubts about intentions of the giver, and maybe that I will think that the I will also have questions about the emotional maturity of that person. So where the criticism given is also a huge factor, I believe, in our reaction or our feelings or emotions attached to it. uh, I believe, Pratima,
Pratima ma'am is unmuted, so I think she can talk. Can you hear us, ma'am? I'm not sure if she can hear us. Although I can see she's not on mute anymore. So.
mhm. But she's not able to hear. I think she's not using her earplugs. So maybe we'll go ahead. What I asked her about, who is criticizing. I believe that in my experience also, I've seen that, who's giving the criticism also matters. We'll come back to that who again. But I will, in the meantime, I'll also talk about what is the criticism. That is very important for me. That what is the criticism I have received. Uh, what happens, like when I am in two modes. One is like when the criticism is too harsh on me, I tend to get reactive. What Kalyani was saying in the beginning, that when we are reacting to that in an angry mode or in a frustrated mode, or sometimes we also opt for walking out of that situation. Uh, but in my experience, I believe that the first cooling, if it happens that we are able to cool ourselves, I think this experience will Jayanti is going to take us through a meditation which will give us an experience of what I mean by cooling. So if suppose I can go through that first step of cooling, then that what I can take in a different perspective. But if it doesn't happen, then without that cooling, I'm likely to remain under the influence of my relative emotions of inadequacy, anger, frustration, hopelessness, worthlessness, etc. for a long time also. Now, because what happens, like if suppose I take it that receiving that criticism, I automatically jump to accepting it, because many times people, I have seen people taking that criticism coolly, but the moment the person who has given that critical feedback, he walks away, and the person says that, okay, I don't accept what the person has said. So uh, in a very emotional, if some emotions are taking over me, then probably I may accept the criticism as it is. I may not just receive it, but I accept it also. Now, what is said in the criticism, let me give you a quick example of like how what my thinking process changes when I accept the criticism. See, one day I was wearing a white open neck top, and I was at the bottom of the staircase, and I just met a friend, and she said, "Oh, Naina, uh, you're growing fat. Just take care." My immediate reaction to myself was, "Oh God, I really have to be very, very serious about my dieting now." Then as I was climbing the staircase, I started wearing my black jacket with a closed neck. And at the top of the staircase, I met another colleague of mine, and she spontaneously said, "Oh, Nena, you look so trimmed. Wow, that's great. Now, what do I do? If I am overwhelmed with the previous comment, I might refuse to take this latest comment also and start doubting it. Then what could be done with this kind of, I mean, the example which I have given is very casual and very trivial, but there are some examples which put us into confusion. So what exactly we do with the criticism that we receive? I have observed that mostly whatever we receive as criticism, it is broadly around three things. A, it is somebody is pointing at your lack of skill. B, it may be my ignorance or lack of knowledge. Or C, it could be my inappropriate behavior. But that too in the perspective of the giver. If suppose I knew it is inappropriate, I won't do that. But in the perspective of the giver, it is one of these. So now, if suppose I receive this, because the example I had given is a very trivial one, what I could do is that, in such case, I will have a reality check. I'll go and stand on a weighing machine. I know if there is only zero point 0.5 or some difference in my weight, I know. Even in whatever I'm wearing, I know my weight. And then my possible actionable takeaway from these two remarks would be that probably black, navy blue, closed necks, these make me look trim. So I will take those as shopping tips for next time. But this reality check was really easy. But it is very important to take a reality check. It may not be so easy in many other cases, but what I have seen some people, what they do is if it is a serious one and it matters a lot to them, they will write down what did they receive. I've seen some people also, at the same time when they are receiving that criticism, uh, I've seen one of my colleagues who would, even if I'm giving her a critical feedback, she would ask me questions. Ma'am, did you say this for this purpose or for this purpose or with this context or that context? It may be probably irritating for the person who is giving you criticism, but this person I've seen never gives up. She will ask questions. Or sometimes some people go back and they do their analysis when they have cooled down and they write down. I find that is useful. So if Pratima is in, we could also get her comments on that. Now, if suppose we have to ask that who question to her on who gives us the criticism. I believe it matters a lot who gives us the criticism, because what I've observed is, like, while I was having my driving lessons, uh, I was really wondering that uh, the same instruction coming from the driving instructor, uh, I was not feeling irritated at all. But when my husband was sitting next to me, and then he gave the same instruction to me, I was like, very irritated, and I wanted to yell, "Oh, yes, I know what I'm doing." So probably there are chances that probably that instructor has mastered the art of giving a neutral comment or criticism, or probably there are other reasons that I am always hooked. When any comment comes from my husband, I'm always hooked, and I have the liberty to yelling at him. So I did that. So who is giving the criticism also matters. And especially, some people, if suppose you are already hooked or already know that they have a habit of criticizing, so that they are going to say something critical about whatever you have done. So if you are hooked, then probably it also affects you, and who also is important. But there are sometimes some people who give you criticism and you probably value their opinion a lot. So it may work for you, as you take it very seriously. Sometimes your expectation also matters about who's giving the criticism. If suppose I'm expecting this person to give me a very positive feedback, but surprisingly it doesn't happen. So maybe that who also uh, becomes a kind of my expectation is not met with. So I am not very much open to that criticism. Now I was also wanting to ask Pratima about how the criticism is given. So you know does it make a difference how the criticism is given?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes,
you can.
yes.
Okay,
Welcome, welcome,
okay.
ma'am. We can hear
I'm
you.
sorry because I couldn't hear for a long time and not being techno savvy. I have already trouble all of you. Uh, yeah, you are asking me, Naina, if I'm right, the question how, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
how matters a lot because there is a difference between a criticism and feedback. I'm sure you must have already heard about criticism and feedback. Somebody or you want to control somebody, then that would matter. That's why the how matters a lot because when somebody is listening, there are emotions also, there are past experiences also, there are perceptions about other people also. That's why it is not only what you say, who you say, but also how you say matters a lot. Words have lot of meaning, mannerism has lot of meaning, and I'm sure we have to be careful how we say what we want to say and why we want to say. Yes, Naina, over to you.
yeah. Then we were asking you when we missed your voice. I was trying to ask you about why are we getting criticized? Why do we get at all?
Could you hear me?
Yeah. Why do we receive criticism? No, in the beginning itself, Kalyani was mentioning about maybe that some people genuinely want us to improve, like our teachers or our parents, or sometimes even our friends would give us some feedback. I remember one time, one occasion when I appeared for an interview, and then I came out of the interview, and one of my friends pointed out that the interview is over, Naina. Why are you looking so troubled, and why are you looking so tense? So I said, I'm not tense. But she gave me a feedback like, look at your eyebrows. They're still stretched. Put them down. Relax. then that time I realized, okay, I was not aware of my gestures. So maybe that, sometimes even if suppose some criticism comes to us, I think why people want to give us that feedback is not always to put us down or show us small. Sometimes they just want to tell us, like, sometimes we are not aware of many things. So they just want to point out that, okay, maybe you're not aware of this. And sometimes the feedback is necessarily required for, if suppose it's coming from a senior, it's necessarily required for improvement in my work. Or even sometimes it is a matter of having my job continued. If suppose somebody doesn't give me a feedback at all, and one day I receive a letter of, you are fired. So it's important that I receive that feedback. I believe that it is important. So why people give us feedback? I agree to what Kalyani said, that sometimes people are jealous. So they just want to tell us something which will put us down, or make us feel guilty or something like that. So that's that also. But then how do we segregate these different kind of critical feedback that we receive? How do we segregate?
One of the questions that we got asked by Margot was, what if you're criticized to the point where it's no longer criticism and it tends to be more bullying than criticism?
Yeah, yeah, it may happen. I mean, at times it may happen to that extent as well. So I believe that if we can segregate that on the basis of the intention of the giver, then it becomes easier to deal with it. What strategy to apply? For example, if it is bullying kind of, but then who's giving is also important. If it is coming from a person on whom you are dependent for something, like for example, if you are superior and you are dependent for your outcome on the superior, then probably that bullying question, what Margot was asking was, the criticism goes to the extent of bullying, then what do we do? So I was just uh, making a mention about it, that I have to weigh that what is the importance of that, or what is at stake. So if suppose my career or my goal is at stake, then I have to take it in stride. And but then what do I do with my emotions, which are generated by that bullying type of criticism? So now when I am taking it in stride, what exactly I do? The cooling will be required more often. In such cases, the cooling will be required more often. Every time I get that, I will have to take it in the first step of cooling very seriously. And then next time when I can draw only if suppose there are beneficial things from that communication, I can only draw those. And I can just put those in a separate box. I can physically, like, or mentally I can create a box and put those into that box, which is not to be taken for and then, so it may also happen that sometimes what happens, that if I get a critical feedback on a particular thing, what my emotional response to that is, sometimes I stretch it all over myself. Like if somebody says that, okay, you have not, this is not a right strategy that you have used. Okay, the person is pointing out that strategy for that event only. What I talk to myself after receiving that critical feedback is more important than the critical feedback itself. If I overstretch it to myself and I talk to myself is that I'm no good at strategy, I can never make any good strategy, I'm worthless finally. So if that, more than that critical feedback is the most important thing is that what dialogue I have with myself. So if I can be conscious, be aware of what I'm speaking to myself about the feedback, I think that will help me better. And if I can write down, that will give me a time, and also a third party kind of feedback again on what I'm thinking. I
Thank
hope I
you.
have answered.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Pratima ma'am, can you answer the next question we had? So someone has asked how to
Yeah,
take and
I'm sorry. Yeah.
can
No,
you
I
hear
have
us?
heard what. Yeah, yeah. Now I can hear. I don't know what happens in between. But can
Oh,
you hear
that's
me?
okay. Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I want
Though I
to
have, yeah.
yeah. I want to ask you a
So,
question that one of the
yeah.
participant has raised.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They are asking how to take and react on the criticism which is done just to demean.
Okay. I heard what Naina was saying, and that is why I won't repeat that. But I definitely feel the point which she was saying, that whenever you hear a criticism, and particularly what you do not like or what you do not approve or what you do not agree, what is the dialogue? Dialogue in the sense, just asking, is there any way you would like me to do, in a very simple way? Because very often people say a lot of things, but when you ask them how it should be done, then they have no answers at all. There's a maybe we can do that. And the self, it is criticism is extremely important for your own self development. There's a no sense bogged down and no sense taking every criticism, oh, that means I am like this. Instead, oh, is it that people feel I am like this? Do I agree? Then go back to your own experiences, find out whether you need a change, think over how you can do that. And I believe that's a process. That's a process of self development. Everything cannot be smooth in life. Let's take it and go over these hurdles. Oh, again, I can't hear.
Oh, not that. That's great. Thank you for your response,
Yeah,
Pratima ma'am. So one of the participants has actually kind of said something on very, very similar lines to what you said. It's up to
yeah,
us how
yeah,
we actually introspect on the criticism
yeah,
received.
yeah,
And we do get hurt, but if we are open, then we can, use it to our advantage somehow.
yeah.
Yes.
I
So
mean,
thank you for that.
to add to that, even our physical wounds. One is the pain. We try everything, and are we not particular that we would like to use the medicine? Then criticism is somewhat like this. Let's not have the scars, but let us take the criticism as a way of life and deal with it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, actually.
Yeah. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. So, do you want to continue your conversation for a bit, for whatever was left over from the W's of criticism, Dr. Naina Mendi and Fatima ma'am?
If we can. And if in between this technology doesn't allow me, I'm sure Naina will go ahead. Because it's the younger generation who has to move ahead, right? That's why I'm at the back of her with feelings at least.
Mhm.
Yeah, Naina.
No, Pratima, I was wanting to know from you more on if suppose like people who criticize us have uh, mean intentions or not so good intentions, then how do we differentiate?
Okay. There are two types of criticism people might do. One is on you as a person, and the second on you, three. The second on you, your views, and third on your action. This is what happens in general. I believe if it is action and views, we might have to revisit ourselves and have a dialogue, if not with that person, with the people with whom you are friendly, who do feel that will give you the right opinion about it. But if the person talks about you as a person, the individual things, whether how you look, what you do, and all, I think the best is to close it in a drawer. There's no need to open it and think about it. But views definitely, because very often our views and our actions are based on our own individual reading, knowledge, capacity, our own experiences. And we might feel they are genuine, we might feel they are right, but there could be other side of that, and that other side matters a lot. One, about our relationship with the person. Very often I'm afraid that when we say, hey, forget what, no sense taking his opinion, at times we ourselves might be very unknowingly criticizing that person, because the other person might have real views to share and for us to think about it. So I would look at it, what is mean should be decided based on the merits of those words, merits of what you know about that person, what others tell you, and these others should be very selective people. I mean, your genuine understanding about people who are knowledgeable.
One more thing, Pratima, I would say that
Yeah.
some people are highly sensitive to criticism while others are not. So if suppose I find myself to be highly sensitive to criticism, that even a smallest comment
Yeah.
hurts me or matters a lot to me, uh,
Yeah.
then how is it connected to my uh, other personality? Like if suppose like uh, do you think that I have low self esteem?
No, I won't say that, but you are a delicate flower. If that, even you will see what to whom we feel delicate. It's not easy. They don't fall down immediately, right? Then you have to protect yourself. No? Then nature also protects you because you are on a tree which takes care of you. That's why if you are highly sensitive, I think you are an obstacle for your own growth. I mean, we all have to be sensitive, but the moment we become sentimental, there is a difference between sensitive and sentimental. Sentimental doesn't allow you to move forward in life. Sensitive gives you a mirror in which you should see. We all want to, I can give you, now I don't want to look old, but I have to accept, no? I can be sensitive about it and can do something, but I can't be sentimental saying, oh, I can't be. It's not in my hand. I'm bound to grow every year. I feel then you should compensate with reading, you should compensate with understanding people, you should compensate with the words which you use. Your actions should be such, your sharing should be such that people then decide, oh, she might have really meant it, or don't worry, I can ask. In short, people should feel like asking you back or keeping the dialogue open. And the moment you create that atmosphere, I believe criticism itself fades out. Otherwise, it gets strengthened in everybody's mind.
Okay. Yeah. Kalyani, would you like to take it further?
Can I just say something quickly? I
Yeah.
really resonated with what you said about people being highly sensitive, and I believe that I relate to that because I feel like I'm a very emotional person. But like you said, I think there is a flip side to it, which is positive,
Yeah.
which makes me a very empathetic person,
Mhm.
and I can use that to counterbalance the highly sensitive side of me, and be open more
Yeah.
to criticism. So I'm definitely going to keep that in mind for my own self.
Yeah, I mean, if you tend towards being sympathetic, it is between compassion and all. You should have compassion for all, but when you are putting it in action, have the empathy because it gives you logical meaning. Only being, compassion, only being sensitive, only feeling bad for others, action stops. And ma'am, action is the most thing in our life. It takes us forward so long as you know how to take two steps backwards.
That's great. That's really on point. Pratima, ma'am, one more question for you
Yeah.
before we
Mhm.
move on to the meditation. Um,
Mhm.
so I think people are really impressed. So they're giving feedback saying you are a real expert, and they're loving what you're saying, and the words of experience and wisdom are really great. Um, so they're asking about, when you receive criticism from a person, even if you take it positively and you try to look with introspection and improve yourself, you tend to get a bit more extra conscious around the person, and you're more aware of, oh, if this person is judging me. So how do you deal with when you meet that person again?
uh, I'm not promoting Jayanti, uh, but when we are talking about self-talk and we are talking about having discussion and thinking aloud and all, it's not that easy, because somebody's criticism keeps on pinching you, and your whole, I feel, finally, your feelings are also in your brain. That's why if your brain doesn't work, your feelings are bound to flow. And anything which flows, we know it's not necessarily always good. That's why I would say that the best way when you feel hurt, you feel the focus is on yourself, not only what others says, but even if you feel, I feel being quiet, not attempting not to think on it. And of course, like meditation, of course, like diverting your mind to something which you enjoy, helps you to go back putting your thinking hat rather than your emotional hat. Emotional hat sometimes allow you to work hard, but not necessarily right way.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm sure all the participants are really benefiting immensely from this conversation and from
I'm
your work.
sorry, I behaved like a Havaldar on this thing, coming in whenever I want. But I don't want to be Havaldar. I want to be a warrior only. Sorry.
No, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate you joining us today. In spite of all the technical difficulties, I really appreciate your resilience. I think that's also
Yeah,
something.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think
Kalyani, before you go to the meditation,
yes,
I think you'll be now going to the meditation part.
yes,
I would just like to ask everybody who's joined us that at the end we have given one small animated clip on what happens when I'm saying that we want to cool down. We should be cooling down when we receive any critical feedback. There is a center in the brain, amygdala. People who are
Yeah.
scientists here must be knowing that. And then what happens? What is the impact of deep breathing that is cooling on that? You can just see that
Yeah.
for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Good one.
perfect. Thank you very much. We do have a summary of all the techniques and things to be aware of and what we've learned. But before we go to those summary and the action steps, I think it's critical to absorb the information, go to a relaxed state of mind so that all this newfound awareness can seep in and we can take advantage of it. So let's move to the meditation, and Jayanti will guide us through his meditation for cooling. Thanks, Jayanti.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. Also, the conversation between you both was amazing. It was very enlightening for me as well. Uh, and I would say for everyone who has ever received criticism, which is basically all of us. So, thank you for that. Um, Today, we're going to do a very interesting kind of meditation. And this is the first time for me to conduct something like this, so I'm really excited about it. And I hope that you will also get some benefits from it. So before we get started, there are two things. First thing is that I know that some of you had, when you had expressed your interest, we all had thought about a moment in our life when we were being criticized. So if you haven't still thought about that moment, now is this uncomfortable time that I'm subjecting you to think about a moment in your life when you were criticized. Could be something recent, or it could be something old which has really left a mark in your memory. So I want you to think about this and write to me in the chat window about, if I give you a scale from 1 to 10, on this scale, how disturbing event is recalling this event of criticism for you. So if you can just type to me in the chat window something, give me a number. Okay, perfect. So as you're doing that, I will also explain to you, we're going to use two things in this meditation, which is different from just breathing. So one is this action, which I'm going to show you right now. And it's really, really simple. It's just you crossing your hands like this and doing this with your shoulders. So just slowly rubbing your own shoulders. It's as easy as this. Okay. And the next action is moving your eyes laterally from side to side. So moving your eyes to the left and your eyes to the right, and you keep your eyes closed. You go eyes to the left and eyes to the right. And it's as simple as these. So these are the two actions that we will be doing during the meditation. And I believe you've given me some numbers in the chat window about how disturbing this memory is. Even if you haven't given it to me in the chat window, that's fine, as long as you remember a particular number in your mind. So let's get started with the meditation now. There is no fine by you. So let's get started. First of all, I want you to sit back, relax, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths. Breathe in deeply through your belly and breathe out slowly. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, I want you to recall that uncomfortable memory you experienced when you were being criticized by somebody. Think about how it made you feel. Did you feel anger? Was it upsetting? Saying something back to this person? Feel and experience now. I'm going to ask you to clear your mind now and rub it off as if you were erasing something from a board. Rub it off. The next thing I want you to do is do the action of rubbing your shoulders. That you're going to start doing this action now. And picture yourself on a sunny day, you are walking on a beach, and you're going to count from 1 to 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now, I want you to keep your eyes closed and move your eyelids laterally from left to the right. Eyes to the left, eyes to the right, 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 eyes to the left, to the right. Now take a deep breath and let it go. Now I want you to imagine the next scene where you are walking down steps. And these steps are located in a very beautiful and colorful garden. Picture this garden, the flowers. Maybe you can imagine some butterflies fluttering. this imagination. As you walk in this garden, I'm going to count again from 1 to 20. And as I do this, you will go back to rubbing your shoulders. Start rubbing your shoulders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. Now, move your eyes to the left and right laterally as I read out these statements to you, and you will mentally repeat them after me while you move your eyes from left to the right. I love and accept myself for who I am. I am adequate. I am worthwhile. I am blessed with abundance. I am capable of giving and receiving love. I love and accept myself for who I am. I am adequate. I am worthwhile. I am blessed with abundance. I am capable of giving and receiving love. Now, take 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to count from 1 to 5. And at the count of 5, you'll have your eyes open and you'll be feeling wonderful and awake and fully alive. 1, 2, 3. Getting ready now. 4, 5. Eyes open, wide awake. Thank you. How was that experience for you? And now I want you to write in the chat about whether or not this memory is less disturbing for you. Does it have, when you're thinking about this memory, does it have a lesser impact? It may or may not have a lesser impact, but if it does, or if you felt any different, please type in the chat. Okay, that's amazing. Margot said she went down to a 3 from a 7, so that's amazing. Feels amazing and less disturbing. That's really good. So the interesting thing about this is that it took me about 5.5 minutes to do this, and your grading has already gone down. So this is a really powerful technique. And if you want to do this for other things, or if you want to learn deeper, go deeper in this technique, you want to learn more about it, this is a technique called the Havening technique by Paul McKenna. And it's at the end of the references, so you can have a look at it. And Paul McKenna is a brilliant, he's a therapist. He does hypnotherapy. And I find his talks really wonderful, and he has an amazing British accent also, which is an added advantage. But along with that, don't get lost in the fancy British accent, because there's a lot more to it. So I really recommend Paul McKenna's work to all of you if you found this helpful. Over to you, Kalyani.
Thank you, Jayanti. I think that was something I'm sure it must have been quite unique to most of our participants. I hope you enjoyed that. We are running out of time, so I'm going to be quick with the summary of today's session. Please feel free to take a picture if you want to recollect these points at any time. So what did we learn today from what we've been sharing about criticism, and what our amazing guest speakers have been sharing through their conversation and through their years of experience? So the first thing I think is, when you receive criticism, I know it's easier said than done, is to pause and listen, So that in itself will change it from a response, change it from a reaction to a response. So, and when you look back, oftentimes you will think the reaction is out of proportion, unwarranted, probably makes you feel worse after, versus a response which is a bit more calculated because you took some time between when the criticism was given to you versus when you absorbed it and thought a little bit about it. Um, doesn't mean you just take everything quietly, but that extra bit of time you buy will be immensely helpful. The second thing is absorb through active listening, and unpack after the cooling. So if today's cooling experience was, uh, if you believe that that's been helpful, then when you receive the criticism, I think sometimes it's probably a good idea to just listen to it, distance yourself from it a bit, and best thing could be probably before you go to bed that night, because usually if things brew in your subconscious, that's when you overnight they tend to build up. Maybe do the cooling before you go to sleep to really soften the effect of it, soften the blow of it. The third tip is to depersonalize. So as Dr. Naina mentioned, getting feedback on the same day about someone thinking that she looks chubbier versus someone thinking she looks slimmer. So what do you believe? Oftentimes the criticism coming from the person is a reflection of them. It's to do with their story, their background, what are they experiencing in the moment. So take it with a pinch of salt. Um, the fourth tip is to do a reality check, or taking the giver's perspective. Sometimes, as Jayanti mentioned, if your boss or your supervisor has just dismissed you, uh, it could be that they were in a bad mood, and they themselves were having a bad day, and they decided to just download everything on you. It's probably not at all about you that day, it's about them. So taking that reality check can only happen after you buy yourself a little bit of time. The processing criticism will be liberating. What that means is that every time, I've heard so many people, when they receive some criticism, especially if they believe it's unfair criticism, they tend to go about telling people or telling friends about, hey, you know what, this one told me about how incapable I was, and that's totally not true, and this is what I've been doing. So each time you narrate that example to somebody else, you are basically subjecting your mind and body to the exact same emotion. So the incident is in the past now, but you're reliving it through your emotions. That is because you haven't given yourself time to process it. If you process it, you practice maybe the cooling meditation, or buy yourself some time and reflect on it, you will realize that you will not be reliving that again and again each time, subjecting your mind and body to it. You feel like by telling others, they will sympathize with you and they will think, oh yeah, you're so right. But it's rather, you take it as a fuel and prove it with your action, so that the person who's criticizing is silenced. Easier said than done again, but one perspective about criticism. And the last point, unfair criticism also has some message to be derived. So Pratima ma'am told us about, how if you're so delicate, if you're a delicate flower where everything upsets you and you tend to take everything so personally, then especially if it's unfair criticism, you will take it to quite an extent where it'll damage your self-esteem probably even. And you might have to, it'll take a lot of reconciliation work to build that self-esteem back again. So I think the biggest takeaway for me was to giving it a pause before reacting, and trying to depersonalize, trying to distance a little bit from it. Obviously comes with practice, I suppose. And I'm no expert. I'm just equally as everyone else a learner, and enjoying this field of potential of the mind, therefore exploring it more and more, which brings me to the next slide, which is the handy references for today. So today's topic, I heard so many people saying, wow, this is quite interesting, quite relatable, very relevant. And it sounds simple, but the research for today led me through so many different and incredible resources, including our guest speakers. And you can take a picture of this slide if you like, with handy references as well. And what I went through about criticism and its association with your self-esteem was very, very intriguing and really interesting. So here are some YouTube videos that you can watch as well, and there's a book and some articles you can read, and then there's a couple of Instagram Instagram accounts that we follow. And as always, please, if you like what's been discussed at these webinars, follow us on Instagram and write to us on our Gmail address. We love hearing your feedback. We love hearing what you think. And please feel free to also suggest any ideas, any topics that you have, and how did you think the guest speakers were today? I'm sure you found them really helpful. I am happy to share with you in the chat here now the guest speaker's email address, which you can, if you're interested in further contacting them or talking to them, then I'm just going to type it in here now. Thank you very much for your participation this evening. And I look forward to our next session.
Thanks a lot, Kalyani. Before we leave, I just want to add something quickly. Just want to say thank you to our guest speakers, and especially to Pratima ma'am for sharing everything. And I feel like I've been a delicate flower my whole life. And I think the key takeaway for me is to be a delicate flower that's flexible, that can adapt to the feedback and criticism and use my emotions in the right way, rather than being a delicate flower that's fragile and that can break. So flexibility, like delicate flowers can be flexible. So
they can be a bit more resilient, maybe like a cactus flower.
All right.
Okay.
I think everybody, you can unmute yourself, and I want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you to our guest speakers. As usual, our recording will be on our YouTube channel, which is Teja Discover Radiant. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you guest speakers. Thank you Kalyani, and thank you Jayanti.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. I think we did well. 2 minutes to go.